We're here now with Senator Kamala Harris. She's a Democrat from California, first elected to the Senate in 2016 after 20 years as a prosecutor, including stints as the district attorney for San Francisco and attorney general of California.
And Senator Harris has also been laying the groundwork for a run for the White House. It is great to have you with us on this special holiday. Do you have an announcement you'd like to make?
I am running for president of the United States.
Well,
And,
that's a big announcement.
and I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about it.
You mentioned 20 years, we mentioned 20 years as a prosecutor. If you win,
Yes.
you're going to be commander-in-chief.
Yes.
What qualifies you to be commander-in-chief?
Well, first of all, let me just say I love my country. I love my country. And this is a moment in time that I feel a sense of responsibility to stand up and fight for the best of who we are. And that fight will always include, as one of the highest priorities, our national security. And thinking about it in a way that we understand that we must be smart, we must understand the power that we have, the strength that we have. That is about military power, it is about diplomatic power, it is about the power that we have in terms of what has been, until recently, our moral authority in the world and our ability to work with our allies. I am a career prosecutor, as you said. My entire career has been focused on keeping people safe. It is probably one of the things that motivates me more than anything else. And when I look at this moment in time, I know that the American people deserve to have somebody who is going to fight for them, who is going to see them, who will hear them, who will care about them, who will be concerned about their experience, and put them in front of self-interest. 11 months ago, at the launch of our campaign in Oakland, I told you all that I am not perfect, but I will always speak with decency and moral clarity and treat all people with dignity and respect, that I will lead with integrity and I will speak the truth. And so that's what I've tried to do every day of this campaign, and here's the truth today. I've taken stock and I've looked at this from every angle. And over the last few days, I have come to one of the hardest decisions of my life. So here's the deal, guys. My campaign for president simply does not have the financial resources to continue, and the financial resources we need to continue. I'm not a billionaire. I can't fund my own campaign. And as the campaign has gone on, it has become harder and harder to raise the money we need to compete. In good faith, I cannot tell you, my supporters and volunteers, that I have a path forward if I don't believe I do. So, to you, my supporters, my dear supporters, it is with deep regret, but also with deep gratitude, that I am suspending our campaign today.
Questions about the president's age often go hand in hand with questions about how you would step in the role, if necessary. Do you feel prepared for that possibility? And serving as vice president prepared you for that job?
Yes.
And how would you describe that process?
Which process?
Like as far as being ready for that.
Well, first of all, I'm answering your hypothetical. But Joe Biden's going to be fine. Right. So that is not going to come to fruition. But let us also understand that every vice president understands that when they take the oath, that they must be very clear about the responsibility they may have to take over the job of being president. I am no different.
But even Democrats are worried about the president's age. The Wall Street Journal had a poll showing 2/3 of Democrats say Joe Biden is too old to run again. Are you prepared to be commander-in-chief?
Yes, I am, if necessary. But Joe Biden is going to be fine. And let me tell you something. I work with Joe Biden every day. Under Joe Biden's leadership, we have transformed and are in the process of transforming America's infrastructure with an historic investment in not only roads and bridges, but high-speed internet, what we are doing around issues like lead pipes, and I could go on and on.
Are you taking the threat of a second Trump presidency seriously enough?
I don't understand the question.
You were dismissive of some of the Republican criticism of you and the president. When you look at current polling, the front runner for a Republican nomination is the former president, the 45th president.
We will win re-election.
We will win
re-election. There is too much at stake, and the American people know it.
I hope you enjoyed that little montage. last week I did a video about Katie Britt possibly running for president in 2028. And I thought, what better follow-up video than to address the possibility, well, really the probability that Kamala Harris will run for president in 2028. This isn't really going to be about whether she'll run, because I think it's just almost guaranteed that she will. I mean, you look at the last several vice presidents, and the only one that didn't run, in recent history was Cheney for pretty obvious reasons. Very, very unpopular. So it's not a question of if she's going to run or not. It's a question of if she's going to win. And before we answer that, we have to talk about some of the factors and circumstances that other people have speculated on. Now, there are some people who don't remember. I don't know how they don't remember. They just seem to be living under a rock. But Harris ran for president in 2020. I showed the clips of her announcement and her suspension. And the campaign was another one of these flash in the pan, brief surge, then steep declines endeavors that you see pretty much every cycle. You had a person who, when they entered the race, and after they gave this debate performance against Biden, the first debate, I remember it like it was yesterday, where she assailed him over his opposition to desegregated busing. She experienced a polling surge. And after everyone's favorite Democrat turned independent, but not basically a Republican at this point, after Tulsi Gabbard came out and assailed Harris for her record as California's Attorney General, she started to plummet in the polling. And after that, it wasn't too long before she got out of the race, before a single vote was cast. The campaign just failed. It didn't do well. She was not an effective campaigner. She had a few moments of highlights, and that was it. So for the rest of the year, she sat out the race until being picked by Biden to be his VP. She was one of the top contenders, along with, I believe it was Elizabeth Warren, Val Demings, and Gretchen Whitmer. And specifically Clyburn, whose endorsement of Biden helped him win the primary. The South Carolina victory was Biden's first after losing the first three primaries in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. He did this mainly out of obligation to him. And Harris has been vice president ever since. And a lot of people have floated the idea that Biden is running again in 2024 because the Democrats are worried that Harris would not be able to defeat Trump, which I'm just going to say this. I think her approval ratings are very bad. They are bad. But Trump's aren't good either. So because a lot of Democrats believe that she would not be able to defeat Trump in a general election, the theory is that Biden is running for a second term that he's going to hand off to her at some point during it. A lot of people, myself included, just can't see Biden serving out a second full term and leaving office at age 86. I don't think that. I think he's gonna feel sick. I don't think he'll die in office. I think he'll feel sick and then step down or something to that effect. It's really hard for me to believe he's going to serve out a full 4-year term. Now, the reason this is significant is because this means going into 2028, Harris would be the incumbent president, and any attempt at primarying her by, it could be progressives, it could be more conservative Democrats, will basically just be considered a joke by the media. It won't be taken seriously at all. And this could, the incumbency advantage could help her, right? Because now you have a record you can go off of and you can say, hey, look, I've continued whatever successes that Biden had. But really, the heart of the problem with Harris is the lack of ability to be an effective campaigner. I mean, I said before, winning statewide races is doable for someone that's not charismatic, because oftentimes those statewide races do not have people that are well known. You get with the most donors. You have ads playing all over the place that show you in a good light. There's a lot of factors that go into the fact that many of the people who hold top positions at the statewide level are just not individuals you could see making a successful run for the White House, and it shows in how they campaign. Harris got destroyed in that 2020 primary. She did horribly. And for that reason, a lot of Democratic insiders are correct to think, yeah, she might not be able to hold her own against Trump or DeSantis or any of these other people. Were she the 2024 candidate. But if we're going to just assume that Biden is able to serve out his full 4-year term, 4-year second term, right? And then Harris runs in 2028. Sometimes you have to look at history and trends, and you have to use that as a basis to make a claim. Like, I could realistically see Harris, if the economy is better, if she's able to, depending on who she runs against also is a factor, if she's able to outmaneuver that person, I could see Harris getting a victory in the 2028 general election. But what I'm having a harder time seeing is that if this is an open primary where she's just the incumbent vice president, she's not the president, this is after assuming that Biden serves out a whole 8 years, I can't see her defeating the other Democrats that might run. I think Newsom is a complete snake who has destroyed the state of California. I guess it was already destroyed, but certainly not made it better in any conceivable way. Who is more interested in running for president years before the race even begins and actually doing anything for his state. But even in saying all of that, I have to admit that people who aren't as knowledgeable of him, who are not as policy oriented as me, are much easier to be swayed by him into thinking that he's a good leader, statesman, whatever term you want to use, than Harris is. He comes off a lot more likable, a lot less nervous, and very much someone that, if you put them in front of a camera, is able to express themselves in a way that is relatable. And it's kind of crazy to think about how a lot of people have their problems with Obama, myself included, but he was one of the greatest orators of the last 50 years in American politics, easily. And Harris is such an antithesis in that oftentimes when you listen to her speak, she seems nervous or scared. Very much many of her more supposed powerful lines are kind of couched in a sort of scripted manner. And I would say many of the same things about someone like Hillary Clinton, but you would then run into the argument that, oh, you're being sexist. And that's not true, because someone like Elizabeth Warren or Tulsi Gabbard, or, I mean, even, Marjorie Taylor Greene, when these people, when they speak, I don't feel that same nervous, scripted nature related to any of them. So it's really not a gender thing. It's just, this is a statewide politician who got a little bit ahead of herself in running for president in 2020 and got creamed, and now has the training wheels of being VP for someone who's been around a hell of a lot longer, and hopes that she can springboard off of that to running and becoming president herself in another 4 years. Which I would say at best, it's going to depend on factors that are... See, the thing about 2020 is that it was such a unique cycle, right, where you had this horrible pandemic that prevented the candidates from campaigning, and even though Biden was getting made fun of over his deficiencies and whatnot, due to the fact that everyone was just indoors, staying inside, not going outside, it allowed him to campaign as little as possible and make as few public appearances as possible. And he was up against a president who was historically unpopular. if 2028 rolls around and we have President Harris and her approval rating is the same as it's been as her as VP, barring a national crisis like that virus, she's going to see something pretty similar happen, but it's going to be the inverse, where you've got this historically unpopular president, or, you know, again, if she's vice president, historically unpopular incumbent politician that's in the national office, with various Republicans who are lesser known and thus are able to kind of like coast off of people not really knowing who they are and not really knowing much about their record, and they come out and say, if you keep President Harris in office, she's going to continue to creep socialism onto him. You know, they use their little generic goofy lines, but the real problem here is that it's going to be hard for her as the incumbent who's got the 8 years of baggage of both Biden and herself to stage a successful run in 2028. And that, you know, we talk about how there are certain things that do unite people. Like you look at the Israel saga, the Gaza incident, where ever since October, that's been a major rallying point for these campus protests. And the way that Biden has handled that has been the subject of criticism from both sides. The economy is something that people are also very worried about, right? Inflation, prices increasing. These are things that, whether the Republicans want to take away everybody's right to get rid of their kids or not, they're going to keep coming up unless Harris, who I don't think is that effective of a campaigner, is able to make the case of, look, things are getting better, etc., etc. Here's proof of this. And if she's not able to do that, which I don't think she is, then she's going to be in for a problem. I'm telling you, 2028 is going to be such a unique, and I said this in the Brit video, it's going to be such a unique cycle because you're watching two parties that are at crossroads, where you've got the Trump party for the first time in 12, 13 years without its leader. And there really is no heir apparent. It could be Marjorie Taylor Greene. It could be Kristi Noem, well, before she, did her dog slashing thing. It could be Carrie Lake. It could be Huckabee Sanders. Could be Ramaswamy. Who knows? But there's no like specific person that you can just tie as his heir apparent. And on the Democratic side, assuming that Biden serves out a full 8-year term, Harris will be the very obvious heir apparent, but she's unpopular, arguably the most unpopular of any of the people that feasibly could run in 4 years. Like, I know Sanders won't run again, for example, but someone like Warren could run again, Klobuchar, Booker. All of these people who we haven't like had the same level of just microscopic attention focused on, Newsom, right, could jump in, and we could see a repeat where, like, yeah, Harris will have an elevated position as the VP, but when they ask her, what did you do during those 8 years? I tried to solve the problem at the border. Well, that was during the time where the Republicans were saying the border was out of control and we were getting assailed for it. Because even if Democratic voters in the primary are not, hyper-focused on being nativist, a lot of independent voters and other people that you have to sway to even be able to win these damn elections will look at that and say, yes, she was in control of the border while it was looking the way it did and all these people were coming over here. She failed. That's going to be the next president. Get out of here. That's something that they could throw at her, and it might be effective. And really, I've tried to say before, I have no more ill will towards Harris than I do Biden. I think they're both. I think she is very similar to Biden in the sense that neither of them have defined core policy convictions. Like, they'll just change their position depending on what's the most popular. That's why when Harris became senator, this lady who never talked about single-payer health care a day in her life all of a sudden signed on to Medicare for all. But then when she's running for president, has to impress the donors. She starts talking about her own version of it, backtracking. It's the same thing with Biden, where he shifted his positions a lot too. But the key difference between the two of them is that Biden is, prior to having his issues, a good public speaker. He's likable. he can appear to be moderate, even if whatever his position he's taking is, called extreme by the people who already don't like any Democrat, period. And he's just someone that I think, especially if this were him 10 years ago, would be a very formidable candidate to run against any Republican, pretty much. Harris is a vice president that's been given an impossible job that she'll of course be blamed for, right? The immigration issue. Who, as senator, really didn't do much because she wasn't in there for that long, and it was mostly just for her to springboard to run for president. Who, as attorney general, we talked about before, sent the parents of kids with truancy to prison. Just all, we can go down the list. Her record is a lot less impressive than Biden's, and in many cases there are issues with it as well. But you have to also consider, and this is important, that many times people vote for someone because they don't like the other person. So there's a lot of people who in 2016 thought Hillary was devil incarnate, but they said, you know what? Trump's even worse. A lot of people in 2020 thought Biden was just this mealy-mouthed, switch from one side to the other man whose brain was possibly melting. But guess what? Didn't like Trump, so they voted for him. So if Harris is able to run against, in 2028, someone that people despise, think is despotic, etc., etc., that does clear a path for her. Really, you also have to just mention that you have these, I don't know, the Republicans, they might be tempted to say, because we talked before about how Trump wants to pick a woman as his running mate because Biden's vice president is a woman. So whoever he picks, they might be able to do the whole, like, I don't want to turn this into a gender war, but if he were to pick someone like, for example, I don't know. I don't want to say no. Let's just say Haley. Let's just throw her out there because she was one of the main people that was saying, vote for Biden is a vote for Harris. If Haley were to, for example, be the nominee in 2028, which I don't think she would because I think she's just pissed off the Trump voters too much and they're not going away in 4 years. She could say, hey, look, I was governor of my state. I was UN ambassador. I have both domestic and foreign policy experience. I didn't have to put people in jail for their kids not going to school. I didn't have to use prisoners for cheap labor in my state. Just she could really assail her over mostly her record as attorney general. And of course, if she were to go into the VP stuff, it's mostly just the immigration issue. But at that point, it's like, okay, well, Harris can say, look, you enabled Trump. You were fine with supporting him after January 6th. It really just turns to this thing of how much are you disgusted by the attempt to destroy American democracy versus how much are you disgusted by, immigration or whatever other given issue. And there's a lot of people who have a fundamental belief that, enabling election deniers who tried to overturn results, not okay. No, thank you. Goodbye. But just to wrap this up, I have no more ill will towards Harris than I do any other mainstream moderate Democratic politician. I certainly prefer her over Newsom because, as I said, Newsom has destroyed California, or at very least done nothing to actually help the state improve after all the years of languishing. And I do believe that the position of vice president is useless. It will never not amaze me that the job that puts you a heartbeat away from being the most powerful person in the world lets you do almost nothing. I think Biden gave her a task that any reasonable person could conclude that due to her lack of power, she couldn't do anything about. And for that reason, I do have some sympathy for her. And I genuinely don't believe she would be any worse as president than any of the other, moderate Democrats we could get. I don't think she'd be any worse than Klobuchar, Gillibrand. I do think Warren would be probably the best one, but I feel like Warren's the least likely to run again in 4 years. But my point is that I don't have any desire one way or the other to see her become president or not become president. This is merely me saying that if you're a progressive or some other person who has a preferred candidate, you're going to be dealing with the looming threat of Harris, the looming question of Harris, I should say, for anywhere from the next year, next 4 years to next 12 years. I mean, if she, for example, becomes president during Biden's second term and he resigns, then she's the incumbent in 2028, and that automatically means all the Democrats are going to just support her and blindly go, yes, President Harris, 4 more years, 4 more years. If Biden loses this time around, or serves out his whole term this time around, in 2028, she's the incumbent vice president, former vice president. Crowded field, whoever you want or prefer, more progressive person, whatever, they're going to have to contend with her, and Harris is going to have the backing of the billionaires and all the other donors, which makes it harder for our side to even be able to get somebody out of there. And then if she wins in 2028, then 2032 is going to be the same thing where all the Democrats, bow down. No matter how bad of a job she's doing, all bow down. President Harris, 4 more years, 4 more years. So what I'm saying is that she is someone who, whether you like her or not, she is one of the 5 most likely people to become president of the United States at this point. And even if it's not during Biden's second term, it could be during 2028. And even if it's not during 2028, it might be 2032. I mean, this lady is going to be at the center of this stuff for a long time. Which is why I'm saying that I don't want the Republicans to win. I don't think they have anyone I really like. I mean, Rand Paul aside, but my point is that it doesn't do me any good to see the Democrats have candidates who are bad public speakers and have atrocious records. And that's why I gave the examples of I lean towards her being able to win being contingent on the Republicans nominating someone that is despised or disliked by independent voters, and Harris getting some better advisors that can tell her to hammer on the message. All this stuff about I'm an American and I want to serve my... It's like, look, all that fluffy stuff is okay, whatever, but talk about actual issues. Talk about the 63% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, or the fact that most Americans can't afford a $1,000 emergency. These are things that should be addressed, but they don't. And that's why, the one thing to take away from this is that people are fine with the supposed... I'll put it this way. When people are struggling and they feel like their life doesn't matter, they don't care about voting for some guy that's been convicted or, tried to overturn the election. Because, hey, look, they don't care about me getting overturned by my damn job, so why should I care about their supposed democracy? All that stuff is foreign to them. It doesn't matter. When people are that dispirited, they just don't care. And that's why I said, if Harris is smart, she will spend the next several years. They always talk about the vice president on the tour here. Go on a poverty tour. Go and visit Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio and all these other swing states and make the case to voters that it's time for some higher wages. It's time for some type of relief, because the more you ignore them, it's going to catch up to you, and Harris could end up being Hillary Clinton 2.0. Except I hope she doesn't go on a several years long public therapy session of I would have won if this person didn't abandon me, or this person didn't abandon me. And to Harris's credit, she seems to not be doing that with her 2020 loss. So I think she has a decent shot of being president if she follows the steps that have been given here. And again, I don't think, as much as I would prefer having a progressive, right? I don't see her as any worse than the rest of the Democrats.